board meeting with the county commission, and so everything is moving forward. We're in a good shape. I'm going to start off this morning reading the normal script we start off with. This is a virtual workshop, so no motions will be made and no actions will be taken today. The purpose of this workshop is a virtual strategic planning session with our strategic planning facilitators. Any member of the public wishing to be heard shall raise their hand at the appropriate time and introduce themselves to the committee. And then members of the public recognized by the chair will have 3 minutes to speak, and the clerk will function as the official timekeeper. And the clerk will now take roll. The clerk is on mute if you're saying anything.
Yeah. Ashley, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yes, finally. Okay, thank you. All right, Member Twombly,
Here.
Member Cornell, Member Snyder,
Here.
Member Pickison,
Here.
Member Kaysen,
Here.
Member Goldwire,
Here.
Member Papa,
Here.
Member Stokes, Member King, Member Arrington, and Member Kyan.
Okay.
Here. It looks like Christy's logging on and Candace
Okay.
is here. She just didn't unmute.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay, we'll now move on to our agenda, including any revisions. Has everybody had a chance to look at the agenda? And is there anything that needs to be adjusted? Okay.
Cheryl, I just have a,
Now,
I'm
Sure,
sorry,
go ahead.
I just had a clarification question. So
sure.
finalized funding strategies is pretty broad. So what I was curious about, I had gone through the materials that were sent to us, and I had some little tweaks, clarifications, and then also some information that came up when we were meeting with the board that were not reflected in the minutes. Because mostly
Okay.
what they said was what the general public comments were. Or maybe this was
Okay.
this might have been the strategic planning meeting after. No, this must have been the board meeting after. So anyway, my question to you is, what's the format for that? Or is there one?
Nikki or Rusty, do you want to explain what the format will be for the
Sure.
discussion piece?
So the information that we sent to you is based off of our previous discussion with you all. I believe that was steering committee, that last joint meeting when we were all together and we were talking about the goals and how you all, what you all wanted to kind of prioritize. You have had a meeting since then, right? With some additional information. So today's meeting is to ensure that all of that is brought together in the plan, because those conversations haven't, right? We need to bring it all together to create a full picture, and also acknowledge that the conversations have occurred from different perspectives, right? So the conversation in the program funding workshop focused a lot on age groups. And we want to make sure that there's a clear alignment with the focus areas and the goal, so that we don't misalign strategy based off of just focusing on age groups. So we're going to go through that together today and hopefully be able to create a fuller picture.
Does that answer for you, Candace?
Yes and no. I mean, that was what I wanted to hear, but part of it is like, how are you going to do that? Are you going to go through each of these documents, or how is it that you're going to get that additional information?
So we are going to, so Nikki and I have both reviewed and chatted and gone through the workshop that we were not at, so that we could kind of highlight some of the things that were brought up and, understand the current focus, the current funding strategy, and the distribution of funds. What we're going to be doing with you all today is particularly focusing on goals 3 and 4, if you think about them in that way, because we, in our previous discussion, if you recall, those didn't really get flushed out. So we want to make sure that we have the right information in those. And then we're going to go through what would be almost like a ranking to understand kind of what you all consider to be the key, like this is where we consider the potential to be either the strongest impact, or where, due to, a myriad of other reasons that we'll get into when we're having the discussion, this is where we need to put the bulk of our time, resources, right, and energy, and then using that to kind of fill in those gaps. So I think sorry, I feel like I'm like going way down the river, but I want to make sure I answer your question, because I think some of the things that we're going to get in today is not only around understanding what those key priorities are, but also talking about how you can do this work in those things where maybe you're not going to be able to invest $500,000 into something, but it's still something that's important to you. And then where does that fit as either you are a participant in the change through other means, and or you're rolling it into larger strategy. I think something, like people say, oh, well, if you're focusing on 0 to 5, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't have to say 0 to 18 or 0 to 60, but you can put in your RFP that you are going to prioritize programming that puts an emphasis on whole family engagement, right? Like there are other ways to ensure kind of that full focus. And so hopefully the conversation today will allow us to create that alignment, understand the core priorities, start to figure out where the resources are going to go, and then make sure that we're not leaving anything out that is critically important to the trust with the resources you have available.
Okay, well, with that, I think we can turn it over to you. So go ahead. Thank you.
All right, so that's actually perfect, right? So Candace, your question kind of framed out exactly what we were going to be doing with this time. And so Vashti and I, when we looked at what you had previously given us, we had recognized there were some places and spaces that we said, I'm pretty sure they're going to want to flesh out some additional strategy here. And so it sounds like that conversation has been happening in maybe different configurations, in different meetings, in different settings. And we just want to make sure that we capture it all accurately. To her point, we did kind of go back and listen through on some of the conversation that happened. I believe it was on Monday, Christy, that you did a bit of a presentation on the programs, the current existing programs. Some of that we could hear great. And then other, as you can imagine, once folks start talking and the energy rises, for folks who are trying to listen into the recording, it got a little muddled in there. So we just want to make sure that we are hearing accurately the strategies that you want to invest in. And then we are also going to then take time to go ahead and rank those strategies, recognizing that the ranking will help you assign the dollar amounts. And then once we get through that piece, the other part then that we will look at, a part of what I think initially you had designed was doing a full SWOT analysis. So wherever you ended up in your strategic planning process, wanting to know what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we recognize we're going to get to some of those. And so once we kind of get through a ranking, once you get an opportunity and you assign dollar amounts, then we're going to take a look at things from, okay, if you make investment in this way, then what funding are you putting, how is that then aligning with ages? So that would kind of be one access point. So then you would say like, oh, look, this is aligning with our desire to fund certain age groups, but more importantly, we're doing it because these are the strategies we feel like we can see greatest impact. And so really wanting to focus and center strategic planning and strategy, and then from there looking at it across multiple access points, one of which being age, one of which being intervention, prevention, and promotion. So then that's also another space that will then be carved out. Then thinking even deeper about what it means to fund grassroots organizations versus fully established organizations, and making sure that you have carve out funding for that ongoing. We heard capacity building was something that was really important work that the trust has taken up and wants to continue taking up. So I think by going through a bit of the process, it'll begin to kind of paint a much clearer picture. So I will go ahead, and now the only thing I don't like about sharing my own screen is that I can't see. So Vashti, you will have to be a bit of my eyes. So where we're going to start today, again, is just recognizing we have very limited strategies documented when it comes to two of the priority areas. So we just want to make sure that these are the priority areas or the strategies for these priority areas that you feel in this combination will get us to the greatest deal of impact. that the trust is willing to be accountable for or accountable in partnership with. So I will go ahead and share my screen, and Vashti, if you can let me know if that's working.
Yes.
All right. So the first strategy that we wanted to focus on was the third one in terms of your priority areas. All children have nurturing, supportive caregivers and relationships. When we previously met, we heard that there was a real desire to invest in maternal child health programs and family resource centers. This is just a moment for us to say, are there additional strategies that you feel like will help support seeing positive movement in this particular priority area? And the way we're going to do today is a bit of popcorn. So if you'll just come off of mute, or if you want to put up a hand, and then Vashti can kind of see the room. Right now, I'm not able to see since I'm sharing my screen.
Candace, please jump in.
So this is something that was a priority for me to fit in here. So in the goal part of this, I think both of those are great strategies. This is not necessarily my area, but I think that's what we talked about. But under the goal area, under Family Resource Center, I think that is overly specific, or maybe there's another goal here. And this is something we talked about several times in several ways. And that's the whole notion of resource guide, accessibility to a current, complete, accurate source of information for the public and for people and organizations that work to support this population. So for example, at one of the meetings, I did go back and talk to the woman who's the director of the Family Resource Centers. And she said that's like 98% of what they do there. So it's really important that they have accurate, timely, complete information. So I wanted to make sure that got in there. There's another place for it too. But the notion of and I think it can be done through partnering with, I mentioned before, Find Help. But this is something that people in this community have spun the wheels on a lot. I know that from my work, and I know there were a lot of nodded heads. I saw Pat Snyder nod her head. I know Cheryl, you've encountered this as well. So I'd like to get that in here somewhere to make sure that that's part of a target area, to make sure that this community is focused on that. And again, part of it, I'm sorry to be prolonged here, but part of that is oftentimes these resource guides are located in other communities. So it's really important for us to know that we have to feed it often and correctly. And I see Barzella nodding her head. So I'll put my hand down. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace. I think that goal is very, to say Family Resource Centers, and then when you look at what the goal is, you're right, it is a very specific niche piece of that work. So I definitely understand your perspective and want to make sure that, right, as the rest of the team are like, how does that land with you all? Does that make sense to you? Because we can revise that goal to be broader and talk about supporting families and communities in a more holistic way that can reach multiple touch points. And then you all can drill down on the strategies. And this is one of the strategies that could be under that goal, but not necessarily the goal by itself.
Now, the way you have it listed on here, it's the goals, strategy was first and goals second. So what you're really saying is goals are first and strategies are second.
I probably should, I know sometimes I will say the goal being broader. So the Family Resource Center is one of the strategies, and one of the goals will not be as broad as just that piece, but that's one of the underlying tenets. Like, what are some of the bullet points of what are the types of activities and things that we're trying to impact under making connections in community that support, right, supporting caregivers and relationships. And this is just one. I would say what you're saying is highlighted. This is just one piece of that, right? That's not going to hit enough of the community for it to be like maybe really impactful. But I just want to make sure that, that resonates with the group. Lee, I see you have your hand up as well.
Yes, I was going to say, matter of fact, I was going to say the same thing that Candace was going to say, that I think that this is an opportunity for us to be where our role could be a disseminator of information. The one thing that yeah, I think that we need to decide is, is this something that we're going to fund directly? Or is this something that we're going to outsource to act as a, that disperser of information? Or is there something out there? Is there a void out there that exists that perhaps we need to step in to create something or convene a group to figure out how we go about addressing a need that may be there that is not currently being addressed? So I kind of see three different things, which is one of the hopefully there'll be some discussion about what we're going to do on there, but the only way we're going to find out about this is if we know everything that's out there, which is, goes back to the point that the trust could be the source of information for the community. So once we have that, we can see whether or not there's something lacking. And then, the other conversation that needs to take place is, how much funding do we put in there to direct towards the organizations themselves? And I'm done.
And
Thank you.
Lee, I agree with your point too about talking about it as a group, because I think that this is one of those situations where it's been going on in lots of different parts of the community, and having people come together and say, yes, we agree that this is the way we should do it. And this is what it's going to take to do it. And this is maybe even where it would land. So I think trust is going to have to put some money into it though. My experience is that is something that has never gotten very far because it hasn't been funded by anyone.
Okay, so as far as we know, for those of you who are really familiar, and definitely staff to jump in the current county landscape, is there anyone who is really taking the lead on kind of what seems almost like a universal strategy, something that any family could access, right, to get information, resources, referrals, right, program information on things that would help kind of broadly support caregivers and caregiving relationships? What's out there right now? And I think that'll help the conversation for folks to understand where the trust might need to go.
Well,
I think I'm sorry, go ahead, Candace.
well, no, I mean, you may be about to say the same thing as me. What my experience has been, and there's a couple of people who've tried to address this more holistically. Laura Geyer is one of them. I don't know if you were thinking of her, Cheryl, but what my experience has been is that people in each of the different worlds, may it be housing, may it be crisis center, may it be health, have all tried to do this themselves. So that's why it's been part of a problem, is there's been a lot of people trying to do the same thing and trying to keep up with it. So Lee, in response, or not Lee, Vashti, I think that even getting the people together is an activity in itself.
Okay.
So I don't think we should talk about that now. I think that would take too long. And I'm not even sure if we can get to the resource amount. I think we just need, in my opinion, need to know that that's something I think that the Children's Trust is going to need to invest in. However, no, but there should be like a little blank next to it at some point, because again, in my experience, it's never been done well because there's never been resource dedicated to it.
Well, and that's what I'm kind of echoing you, because there are a lot of pockets of information out there. The Homeless Coalition keeps the resource guide. United Way has 211 that you can access online or by phone. We have something called Aunt Bertha that has a conglomerate of resources. We have My Florida, My Families that DCF puts together resources. I think the missing piece of all of those systems, like Candace was saying, is that eyes on the partners that are listed for updates and keeping the information current. And then family, it's how are we promoting this among families, where families know this is a resource I can get to. And so I think that it's got to be that one something that, instead of them having to search through 18 different systems, there is somebody who's making sure that they have a current, correct resource, and it's user friendly and it's easy, and maybe it's us paying for a convener that's going to keep some of these other systems up to date or current or checking what's out there. I'm not sure, but it's been an issue for years in all our communities.
I wanted to add that, and I don't want to contribute too much if that's how we're taking you down a rabbit hole, adding to that. But I want to say those warm handoffs are extremely important when you have families trying to figure out exactly where they're going. You know, if I spend hours calling multiple numbers that may be inaccurate or may not be exactly what I need, I think that's a challenge that we should be addressing in our community. I think that's why the family resource centers are so important. But I think a missing component might be, even if we are providing families with the necessary information, are they getting the help? Are they that additional follow-up? That I gave you some information. Was it helpful? Was it what you needed? Do you still feel lost? Were you able to get in to that service, you know, for your child or for your family? And I think that's a piece that we don't currently receive back. And so I think that's an area that could be improved in our county.
I'm seeing Barzella do a lot of helpful notes in the chat, and Barzella, I mean, that's wonderful. One of the things, I'm just going to comment on one thing. First of all, one of the resources that typically has been used in the community is students. And the problem is students change from semester to semester. So there's been a real lack of continuity. And I also think that what you just said, Christy, about not getting feedback, that's a huge gap. Because I have found that once somebody has tried to find something and they've been unsuccessful, or they've called and it's been like defunct, that's it. You know, they don't go to that source again. So the feedback part, I think, is extremely important. And we've talked about making sure that we continue to listen to our public. So this would be a wonderful topic to always be listening about, I think, is how are you getting information, and is that working for your family?
This is really helpful. I think some of the things that I'm hearing, just kind of like the undercurrent of the need, and that will help us. And, you know, please, you know, nod your head or shake your head no. But that
so,
for this particular area, that there's an opportunity to partner and to convene with others. And so as we're thinking about, like, we have this goal, but as we're thinking, and we'll get to this when we're kind of doing the ranking, but this doesn't necessarily mean this is a place where the trust has to lead, right? But there might be an opportunity to convene and partner with those other community partners who have already started to put things together and figure out how to create a more efficient, right, and impactful resource guide, you know, I guess, you know, kind of just like a library of the resources that are available. Mr. Stokes, I see you have your hand up.
yes, I would just like to kind of tag along with what Christy just, the statement that she just made, because that's what happens pretty much in Micanopy on a weekly basis. We have people that would come into the community center via the Food Network on Saturday, on Tuesday, or just looking for resources, but only to find that a lot of the numbers are outdated, that they've changed, or there's all of these dynamics. And what tends to happen is that what I am seeing is that, one, if I'm continually giving out bad information, then not only do they trust the place that I'm trying to send them to, but you kind of lose where your information isn't even updated. And so there is if there was that central place that, you know, we are a resource center at the community center, but one of the things is that we're referring them to places that, you know, doesn't necessarily follow up with them. And so now we're having to make phone calls while they're here saying, hey, you know, this person, we sent this person over to you all. Yeah, so I think Christy is right on the road.
Thank you. And I want to ask just a quick question before, because I don't want to be presumptuous. So the United Way is Central Florida, the one that serves your, is that right? Okay, so United Way of Central Florida, they're 211.
Mhm.
In a lot of places, that's the lead on this particular issue. Does the trust feel, right, that is it too big of an area, so it makes it hard for Alachua County to get what its needs are, and so you maybe need something separate? Or is there an opportunity to partner with what 211 does and what the United Way does to shore that up, and we can kind of embed that into kind of how we're thinking about where this fits within the goals for the trust? And then after the question, I'll get to Charlotte and Elizabeth.
I think frankly, Vashti, just what I said, I think you're going to have to get a bunch of people together, because 211, find help. There's a bunch of them that are all promising, but they're all missing pieces. 211 has a really bad rap in this community for a lot of reasons. I mean, it's got a really bad reputation. So that doesn't mean they can't be at the table.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And I'll start. Cheryl, your hands up.
I'll tag on 211. I think it's still the case where our 211 is housed in Orlando. If that's still, so, you can only be as familiar as what your system tells you. It doesn't mean they don't know to call Christy if they've got a girl that needs, so it's things like that that make it as valuable as it can be. The other thing that I was going to bring up is the state has moved toward these Hope Navigator positions. So DCF has them. It's called the Hope Florida program, where if you have a family that has an immediate crisis, or you have a family that needs like long-term case care management, they can call this 1-850-300-HOPE number and be connected to a navigator who will then, and the purpose of that program is to assess what their needs are, find out, if they're housing insecure, if they need food, so there's an immediate needs component to it, but then there's also a longer term. Say you've got someone who says, I just need better job skills so I can support my family. They can work with that family up to 6 months, get them into educational programs and things, but the key to that is they focus on a warm handoff. And so DCF started with it, but now DJJ has Hope Navigators to help families that have kids involved in the DJJ system. And now Elder Care has joined that and have developed Hope Navigators. So this system and network of these navigators are beginning to form. Can I say they're 100% effective yet? We're still tweaking it, but I think that's a move that a lot of agencies are also going to, because we all know you can give somebody a phone number. That doesn't mean they got the service. And so I like the idea that, whatever we do, it has to have some follow-up.
Thank you.
And Cheryl, to me, from going back to where we started, this to me sounds like something that's like the resource guides or supports seem to me like a more of a promotion focused, right? So we have access to information and whatnot, but more of a prevention and side-by-side supports. We would want to be thinking about those navigators, because I agree with you. A lot of different types of programs are starting to use those types of supports to ensure that there's a warm and trusting handoff. There's follow-up both ways between the agency or the entity that reaches out, but also the entity that, begins to support. So to me, it's across the ages, because I know it's happening in Birth to 5 through things like Help Me Grow, right? But as you said, it's happening in other ages as well. So it might be helpful for us to think about a network that comes to, or people that come together around more of a promotion. Let's get a resource list or listings that people have access to and can use. But then for folks who need it or want it, let's also think about how we ensure that we have networks of folks who are supporting all of those things, right? So just a thought.
And so we've gone ahead and
back and forth between different, I'm sorry, it seems like we're going back and forth between more universal kinds of supports and information, and then more targeted handoffs and supports and networks and things like that.
Yeah,
Wow.
and that'll certainly be one of the spaces that once we see where you do your ranking for strategy investment, that we'll get a better sense of exactly what that overall balanced portfolio looks like in terms of, well, how much are we putting into promotion? How much are we putting into prevention? How much are we putting into intervention? And we'll keep, it's kind of going to be like rounds of going through it and refining it until you land in the place that feels kind of most representative of the multiple priorities that you're holding. So we've gone ahead and added that kind of strategy around strategic partnership with a specific goal around a resource guide, recognizing that it needs to be more than a resource guide. That I've also heard, like we said, the navigation piece in there, that it's accurate, timely, and that there can be that warm handoff, and that there would be true local ownership. And it would be universal kind of across need for families. So it would no longer be compartmentalized. So I'm just kind of holding it as a strategic partnership place, because as everyone has mentioned, it's not one organization or agency who owns it, but it might be the need for the trust to put some investment into bringing that piece together. So right now I kind of have it as a guide / repository. So that then becomes a third kind of strategy that you'd like to take up in relation to all children have nurturing and supportive caregivers and relationships. That current bundle would look like the maternal child health programs, the family resource centers, and then this idea around this comprehensive resource guide / repository that could also include that navigation piece. Is there anything else from a strategy perspective saying this is a strategy that we must include if we want to see those nurturing relationships? Is there anything else that we're missing from that lens?
One of the things that Nancy Hart on our board is very good at talking about, these umbrella type programs, that it's not just it doesn't necessarily fit in one bucket or another. And you know, that idea of teaching trauma information, you know, in being trauma informed and understanding trauma behaviors. And I think, you know, getting that information in the parents' hands as well is going to be key, because in DCF, I see a lot of families who end up taking in a relative child when they're really little and love them and raise them. And then at 15, 16, they don't know who this kid is anymore. And then they want to give them to us. And so I think when they're young, if you can start teaching families how to recognize, I know we pay for child services, but this is how do we support caregivers and ensure that they have nurturing. And so if we can figure a way that we can fund something that indirectly also supports those caregivers and, you know, keeps those kids in good, safe homes. I know Stacy Merritt, had written down a statement. She said that we always have to look at family stability to impact child safety and security. So that family stability piece is key with this.
You know what? I just want to make sure, Liz, you had your hand up and I can't recall if we actually got to you. I'm sorry about that. And then Lee, I see you too.
I just wanted to say that when we're thinking about this, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of agencies already creating resources, and but one thing that I do see at mostly every outreach event that we have hosted or been at, families don't know where to go to access services. We are now sharing with them SWAG locations, the family partnerships, because at those locations, they are hand-holding people. They are helping them walk through the system, helping them make those phone calls, giving them the information that they need. And I have found that has become helpful to them, because a lot of families, they need that hand-holding. And the family partnerships, I mean, they are really doing a lot of this stuff already. So I think we need to kind of keep in mind on some of the things that we could consider, because there's already a lot of different things happening in the community. But if we're going to think about what we are currently funding, I think the family partnerships are really kind of doing a lot more. And I think we kind of need to look at some of the places that we currently fund and not reinvent the wheel on some of these things.
Thank you, Liz. So absolutely looking at what can it be built off of that's already existing? Because I think a few folks have said, like, there's so many pieces that are already there and really good starts. And then I've heard some folks say in ensuring that whatever is started from is also still accurate and there's commitment to keeping it timely. Lee, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, this
Vashti and I are doing double duty right now.
this will be quick. And this strategy would go for, throughout whatever we're talking about. With the exception of special needs, we really hadn't heard about what's out there that's missing. And so I think that as we look at all these strategies, we should always be cognizant or that is there something missing? And if there is, what's our role in trying to make whatever is missing happen? It may not be to do it, but I just think that that's important because I'm sure there are things that are out there that we're not doing or isn't available that needs to be done.
Thank you. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and recognize that I just want to make sure we don't lose it. We can certainly move it later. But as it relates to the special needs component, we can certainly have it be a strategy that is kind of through several priority areas, but certainly in the part around all children are born and remain healthy, and then also within school success, all children can learn what they need to be successful. So yeah, we can look at maybe having that one be in multiple places.
And health.
Actually, Nikki, what my point was, the only thing that we really heard in throughout this conversation was that perhaps we need to be doing more with special needs. And we've heard that. And that should be important. What my point was, is there something other than special needs that's out there that we're not doing or we're deficient in, or there's a deficiency throughout the community that needs to be recognized? And if there is, and this strategy, but all of our strategies, and if there is, other than recognizing it, what can we do to address it? It may not be our role to recognize it, take care of it. Well, it will be our role to recognize it, but it may not be our purview to come up with the answer, but at least we can recognize it and try to get the conversation going and see how we can address it or how it can be addressed.
Lee, transportation was one of those too that
Yes.
came up.
Yeah.
Transportation is huge and it's pervasive and it's always been a problem.
Right.
Well, at our board meeting that we shared with the county commission, one of the commissioners brought up that there's really nothing in our entire plan that addresses LGBTQ youth who have the highest, they have very high suicide rates and have, additional issues, in school and feeling safe and feeling supported. And so that was a concern that was brought up that I just wanted to make sure you all were aware of.
So I think as what happens is so much of this is interconnected, right? It doesn't fall in one place or space. It is certainly kind of connected through a continuum of how we interact and engage with families, and then the complex set of capacities and needs that they have. And so we're trying to make sure that right now your current funding structure is around these 4 priority areas. And then recognizing there are things that are going to undergird them all, right? So when we say capacity building for organizations and agencies, that doesn't fall in one place. That's about the providers who are actually going to do the service. And so needing to be cognizant of it. Lee, you raised an interesting one for me around special needs, because I'm like, I don't see that reflected in here specifically. So like in terms of what you have specifically said, you want to continue and focus on, that's why I'm like, oh, well, then we need to put it in. And your thought was like, no, in addition to, like, what else needs to be done? Because almost standing from a place of like, of course it's in there. And so where Vashti and I are part of this conversation is wanting to make sure we're not working from any place of assumption. We are truly capturing what the committee is committed to as it relates to these priority areas, recognizing that some of them are not going to nicely, neatly tie up in one place. Some things are going to tie up across. And so right now, as it relates to just that one, and I'm going to try to move us along if possible, when it comes to all children have nurturing, supportive caregivers and relationships, if your kind of mix of programming included maternal child health, family resource centers, this idea around where we're going to have strategic partnership to create things like, resource guides and repositories, also thinking about navigators, as well as trauma-informed programming that was specifically focused on caregivers and families. Is there any other strategy that you say this is a piece of the missing combination for this priority area? Or have we captured it?
I think that, when you talk about special needs populations, if there were a way that there's a resource that they could specifically access very easily, because it's, there are so many dimensions to special needs, and parents are scrambling to find services sometimes very limited services. And so if there was a resource that was specific to that, even a specialty care navigator that said, contact me. Medicaid provides that, but again, it's educating parents on how to maneuver that world as well. So just a thought.
For me, it feels this is more resource guided versus any direct services. And so I think that there's going to be kickback from the community that there's not any direct services involved in this strategy.
As a parent of a special needs child, my son has Down syndrome, and he's 22 now. But at the moment when we were first informed, we were like on an island. We didn't know who to contact. We didn't know what benefits we were able to develop to receive. And had it not been for Dr. Thomasina Adams, who became a great friend of ours, who helped us navigate IEP 504 plans. When you go to the school board, this is what you tell them. This is what you can say. Do not let them tell you to do this. We had the best experience only because of Dr. Thomasina Adams. I can't go back and say this agency helped us. I can't go back and say that this program was great for us. It was Dr. Thomasina Adams, who just so happens to have a special needs child. And that's how now we have families that come to us the best of our abilities, that we tell them the same information, but to be able to say, hey, go to this program, and that's the one that'll be able to ride you through this. To this day, I still don't know of that program. Even when you look at programs that would allow arrested, a break for parents, because listen, it is, I have kids here who that are autistic, and just the stress that you see on their family faces every day. This is, hey, I just want to be able to go to the grocery store or whatever. I don't know that I'm adding to the conversation or taking away from it, but listen, there is not a place that Bishop Chris Stokes, the Willie Mae Stokes Community Center, that I know of at 10:46 on a Thursday, if someone walked in, that I could faithfully tell them that that is a place that they can go and these services will be provided.
If I can echo what you're saying, Pastor Stokes, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I too have a special needs child, and I've lived in 4 different states, and one state got it right. And what they had was, this was embedded in the school district, which is probably the right place to put it. Literally a navigator. I don't remember what the name of the position was, but it was people that worked with people like us, parents, and helped them. And not just with the school, but with some other things as well. So it's that level of navigation again, and it's a whole nother, it's like a niche area of resources. But I hear your pain, because I can't even imagine doing that, frankly, in Florida. There's just not money in the school district, from my perspective.
And I can tell you, as someone who staffs a lot of these kids to try to keep them from coming in to the child welfare system, we struggle as providers to find the right services and the right program. And so I think this is an idea that, you know, may fill a big gap that we should at least discuss further.
So can I say a few things about this area, because it's, as some of you know, it's my life's work, right? The Early Steps program here in Florida, throughout any area of Florida, including here in Alachua County, hires what are known as family resource specialists, and their sole Bishop Stokes, they were not there when you needed them and when Thomasina needed them, but they're there now. And their sole role, and again, and this is a focus on birth to 3, so I'll say that first, their sole role is to do exactly what we were just talking about, as family members who have young children with special needs, or whose children are older, but were involved in the Early Steps program, to help them provide support for them, to connect them with other families, to help them navigate the complexities of the systems that you know, surround them and should be working together. The other amazing network that I'm familiar with is one that was created in the state of Louisiana, across the whole state of Louisiana, that was funded by the Developmental Disabilities Council many, many years ago, and it's called Families Helping Families. And money was put into the system by the state to do exactly all of the things that you all are talking about. And they cover not just birth to 3, but they cover birth through 21. And we could check in with them about an amazing network that they've created. And they've created what they call parent resource centers, as well as Families Helping Families centers that are located throughout the state, and do all of the things that you all are talking about: connect families with each other, have events, advocate for funding, advocate for appropriate systems of respite care. They go to IEP and IFSP conferences to walk alongside families. They provide education to families about their rights and procedural safeguards. So I think there are many models out there that we could look towards. Our state has a Developmental Disabilities Council. It also has what are called University Centers for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. And they also are supposed to be focused on this notion of providing supports for both families as well as youth age, helping youth become self-determined and help them make decisions about their future and their future goals. So I think there are a lot of models out there. Our DD Council in Florida, in my experience, is more state focused and tends to do a lot of work in more populated areas. And perhaps we could connect and help them think about some things that we might want to try in Alachua County, and build some capacity in an area that I agree with everybody is very, very solely underemphasized in this community. Surprisingly to me, as someone who arrived in 2007. So there's much work to be done, but I think there are some opportunities and models that we could look towards. And we just heard from several people who have lived experiences, who could be part there. These are examples of families who can help and connect other families to other resources. So just wanted to offer some insights, but I agree, it is not present, it's not emphasized, and it's a huge issue for many, many families in our county.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think this gives us a lot to kind of reframe kind of what this area looks like. And this has been a really great conversation. I do want to make sure that we give ourselves the time to have this conversation about the other strategy area where we didn't have a huge amount of strategies kind of listed for how we wanted to approach it. So Nikki, can you come back to sharing your screen so everybody can look at strategy number 4 around, sorry, let me get to myself so I see it. No, that's not, I'm looking at the wrong slide myself. Okay. Did I just delete our slide? There we go. I'm like, did I accidentally move it? All children live in a safe community. So right now what we just have is what we have listed is around infant mortality and the child death rate, which also kind of, right, we know that very closely overlaps with goal number 1 around, right, children being born and remaining healthy. So we really wanted to make sure that with the goals around, there was a lot of discussion previously about community violence, intimate partner violence. And so really wanted to get an opportunity to just kind of tease out what we think is the trust role and the strategy that you all would like to see in this particular area, especially knowing that what your current, like kind of the work that you're currently doing is kind of nested in like one specific area. I think there's the violence prevention education program. And I think the other thing there is the midnight basketball. So just wanted to give you all an opportunity to just kind of speak to, because there was so much conversation about this piece. We know this is a need. So the question is the trust ready? Does the trust want to jump into this? Do we need to, lay down, here's the strategy we want to take so that we can rank it and say, we want to put a significant resource here? Or is this someplace where we're saying this is a really huge need, but we got to leave it to somebody else because we're not in the position to actually have the impact that's necessary to move the needle on this one?
Hey, Vashti,
Yes.
I think we have a comment under the Q&A from someone that's also one of our community members, Allison
Okay.
Marks. Do you want me to read it out? Can everybody see the Q&A from Allison? It says Colorado has a great system for navigating complex systems in all domains: housing, education, mental health, disabilities. And she says she was a family advocate in this program. If we ever get to a place to build this kind of infrastructure, she'd be happy to help, but she also put in a link. So
Okay.
I didn't want us to lose that.
Thank you. Thank you. I hadn't seen that yet. Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Allison.
Allison. And then let me check and see if I see anybody's hands up real quick, because I can't see.
So this is the one where Vashti was saying, we remember a lot of conversation around like specific goals that people were interested in. And now the part of the conversation we want to tease out and get a better understanding of is what are the strategies that the trust wants to invest in to support those goals? Or the and part of it to say, or is this a place and space where the trust is going to lead into their strategic partnerships and saying, this is a place and space where we're going to be at tables, we're going to be a part of the convening, but in terms of being able to be, seeing the positive movement, we're going to do that in collaboration and coalition, or we are going to do that specifically through some strategies. And like we said, we heard lots of conversations and we know what needs to decrease, we know what needs to increase. And to Vashti, like we said, we looked at kind of what you're currently funding and just wanting to make sure that are there additional strategies that the group would like to continue to invest in. Lee, I don't know if that's a new hand, but if it is.
It is a new hand. I'll just start the conversation. The first one, the first item on there about decreasing infant mortality, I believe can be folded into another area. And I think that's probably where it should be, because that's something that, we will probably address through some of the programs that we have. As far as the other ones, and I don't have the list. I know, let's see, the thing about decreasing violence with the intimate partner and decreasing violence, I believe overall, and I forget the fourth. But I think that the way we can handle those are through, the after school programs, perhaps I think that all three of those could probably be handled with some sort of after school program presentation that we're talking about, that in the event that in our RFPs, we say that people can come in and make presentations. I think this could be a program that, that we could put into place where they can come in and just talk to the people that are in the programs. More kind of like in a class setting, entertaining class setting, to maybe address some of these issues. But I don't, other than that, I don't know how much we can do in that.
So Lee, I'm hearing you speak to the out of school time activities. So
Yeah. I
So,
also
okay.
think this is a perfect place. I see Ken's hand, so I may have jumped ahead of him, but I think this is the perfect place for mentoring, mentorship, all of those kinds of things, the character building. I think it's all interwoven. You know, if we are providing those kinds of programs and direct services, if you will, to the community, to the kids, it's going to impact, you know, whether or not the kids are living in a safe environment, whether or not they're engaged in those kinds of behaviors. We had a meeting earlier this week where we heard a lot of statistics of gun violence in our community by youth, which got us to thinking about how we could maybe partner with the city to bring a program that they do in the city to our outlying communities, because they too have these issues. So I do think collaboration and partnership. Yeah, Bishop Stokes, we actually had a meeting yesterday with the folks from the city to talk about what we could do for this summer. And then we actually had a really good idea about what we can really do for next summer, because we're almost, you know, summer's almost here. So collaboration is certainly going to be a part of this. You know, how do we work with our municipalities and those other communities to leverage what everybody is doing in some way? So that's all I wanted to add.
Now I don't have to say much what Marcia said. I think this is a collaboration, law enforcement, cities, municipalities, and then what Lee said on the early one, collaboration with the hospitals on early identification of, you know, while folks are pregnant, early mortality and just those programs at the hospital. So I don't think there's one we can handle by ourselves. We've got to actually just be more of a convener and then get folks the right resources, but we got to have the SROs and the school board looped in on this.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what Ken said. This is definitely one that is going to require collaboration. And this may be an area where the trust can think about leveraging the funds to promote some collaboration, especially where we see where programs might not be working in a space, whether that's inclusion, LGBTQ, that might be where you could really leverage the dollars and fund those collaborations. But let's fund the ones that are in the trenches doing the work and that out of school providers, definitely.
And I don't think if we don't have a seat at the table in terms of gun violence, that our community is not going to be supportive of us. I agree that there needs to be a collaborative approach and some meaningful work towards our youth gun violence.
And I think you have to bring in partners like DJJ and River Phoenix and those that are, you know, trying to. And we heard, I can't remember the program, but there was a gentleman that spoke at one of our meetings about, it was like a leadership academy with kids that never saw themselves as leaders, but how it kind of flipped the switch on their view of themselves. And so if we had more programs like that, that would instill leadership versus following. And the mentoring component is huge. Like if these kids, you know, you don't have to have, if you have a home that doesn't have an engaged parent, as long as there's an engaged adult that the kid knows they can trust and can reach out to, it's an important relationship. And so any of those mentoring programs can impact this area.
I think that was Jeff Parker and ICG, Cheryl.
And this was mentioned also at the joint meeting on Monday. And then again yesterday when I was meeting with Roxy from the city, you know, kids who engage in sports, have coaches who are mentors, right? You know, how can we support that and more of that in a very intentional way, where we give those coaches some specific tools that they can use when they have these young people with them. Yeah, there you go, Christy, that trauma-informed coaching.
So for this particular all children live in a safe community, what we're hearing and is that if the infant mortality and child death rate strategy is moving that to probably up to our first strategy around all children are born and remain healthy. So we pulled that out and that makes sense. And then when we're thinking about the intramural violence, community violence, we're really focusing on the opportunities and overlap around our program interventions. And this is, we'll come to this later, but this is really right when we talk about where we invest in older kids, but we're talking about sports, camps, mentorship, after school programs, but all the places where there's an engagement between a trusted, caring adult, right, and young people, and having that be kind of the trust's entryway into that strategy is something that you can measure over time and look at the effectiveness of those programs, while also having a strategy around convening with community partners who are the leads on community violence efforts. SRO, school board, Department of Juvenile Justice, right, and the other players in that area. Is that a good synopsis of kind of what makes the most sense to you all for where the trust should be and how that work, what that work will look like moving forward? Making sure people were with us. Okay, thank you.
No, that was good because, we initially only had one captured there, but we had all the goals. And so now you have fleshed out like the way that the trust will be supportive in moving these goals forward is through these specific efforts that are still very in line with the developmental space that I know so many of you are connecting to. So the next part then we wanted to do, so those were the two that we felt like we needed additional strategy. The other two, we felt like you had pretty much fleshed out those strategies. So we'll kind of just go through them very quickly, but really what we're going to then focus on is the ranking of the strategy areas. We know you've been having some good solid conversation around funding, and we know that Dr. Tasha had recommended, she said a third. And then through your conversation on Monday, you're like, hey, let's think about that some more. And so really we want to do it from a ranking perspective that will get us to the numbers, but that way we can then ensure that the final numbers you arrive at still fall in line with where you see the greatest impact as it relates to strategies. And then again, we will cross-reference that against age groups, promotion, prevention, intervention. We'll cross-reference that across a few different places and spaces. So I'm going to go ahead and Vashti, if you can drive again, because then I will just not be able to.
Got it.
Thank you. But the first half of our conversation is done and we're right on time. So for that, we're grateful. We got the additional strategies. We understand exactly how you'd like to move those forward. Extremely helpful. So we're just going to do a little bit of, if we just think about now our overarching, and that should be priority areas. I know that's the way you have them listed and I accidentally put strategy. So we want to think about each one of these. If you could do, this is kind of like initial reaction, gut response. How would we rank where we see the greatest level of impact the trust could have? So if we were just doing 1 to 4, we know all 4 of these are important, but if you had to just start prioritizing from this vantage point, so we're going to do a lot of macro, micro, and go back and forth. Where would that take you? So does anybody want to share kind of how they would rank, recognizing that they're all important, and from what we've heard, all will be worthy of financial investment.
I don't know how you do that, Nikki. I don't know how you can do 1 to 4, really. This is kind of happened at the CTAC board meeting when there was discussion of what's important, what's not important. I mean, they're all important. I mean, some of it has to do with what this board chooses to focus on, right? So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
So these are the things I would say, and I think the word ranking makes it seem like it doesn't acknowledge, right, the things that you're talking about. So, but what we're talking about is opportunity, impact, right, resources. So it's capacity. So when you're looking at these things, so I think a really good example is, Nikki, will you bring them back up? I just want to quickly just get everyone visually to see just kind of like what we were just talking about all children live in a safe community versus all children can learn what they need to be successful, right? So what we know about both of those being critically important, but from the trust ability to have an impact, to be a community lead, to show evidence of impact of the work, there's a difference between how you can impact, right, safety and violence and the way you can impact something like, right, the programming that you can impact around how children learn to need what they can be successful. And it doesn't mean that one is less important than the other, but it's more just a question around the capacity and the ability of the trust. Like, where does the trust think they can have an impact? Whereas they're not community leadership, where are you in a position to be the lead and thinking about the rankings in that way. So not necessarily which one is more important than the other, but where you can actually have the greatest impact on community outcomes, as this is the place where we should really stake our claim, and then thinking about it in that way, if that helps.
Yeah, with Vashti's explanation, then I would flip what I put in the chat.
And so the other part to hold is that, as we've heard already, you are making commitment to all 4 of these areas in terms of financial resource. So you're not saying, oh, this area gets nothing. You've already said you are committed.
I would flip that priority then, based on what I put in the chat, based on that explanation, because 1 and 2 require significant collaboration with others. And if we can help others and identify that, as opposed to being a provider, but the other 2, I think we can really impact and move as a trust.
Okay.
I would flip what I said.
Okay. I'm trying to take my little notes to me.
And that's what you're asking us, you're asking us to tell you how we would rank those. Okay, all right. So I can't decide between, and it's not up anymore, I can't decide between children have what they need to be successful, what they need to be successful, and all children have nurturing, supportive caregivers, based on how the trust could impact that. And when I'm thinking about, the famous lake, right? I'm thinking about the lake, how can we impact that based on that? I can't decide between 1 and 2 of those 2. So those are at the top. And then all children are born healthy and remain healthy, and then all children live in a safe community.
And I think it's what we're asking is exactly what Christy kind of had to just do, right? Is to say, all are important. We have capacity in all places. But if I just had to say it, these 2 might tie for me, and then these are where the other ones fall.
Can I see them again?
Oh, absolutely. I keep taking my screen down too fast. Are you able to see that?
Not yet.
No, ma'am.
There we go.
Okay, so for me, all children are born, remain healthy, because without that one, then the other 3 doesn't really work. 2 would be safe community. 3 would be learn what they need to be successful. Because for me, all children, nurturing, supportive caregivers and relationship, that would connect with all children born and remain healthy for me. So that would be mine.
Okay, I'm struggling here. I think I am. All children have. What am I? I'm goal 3. All children have nurturing, supportive caregivers. Goal 4, all children live in a safe community. And then goal 2, All children can learn what they need to be successful, and then goal 1. But that was a struggle.
Yes.
I was writing it out, then I stopped, and I changed it, then I went back and changed it again.
And that's why I just keep saying we recognize the trust is committed to all 4 of these areas. We'll invest in all 4 of these areas. The question that we're really asking is, what is the place and space where the trust has the capacity to have the greatest level of impact? And asking if we can arrange them in that way, knowing that all 4 will be financially resourced.
It doesn't make it better though, Nikki.
I know, Marsha, I know.
Checking the chat really quickly. Okay, so flip my numbers.
And I'm gonna stop sharing because, so this is a part of where we're gonna need to get to, right? And we recognize it's not gonna be necessarily an easy task. Thank you for those who did the very unthinkable and either verbalized or put it in the chat. We know others are still processing. I see some hands. We can go ahead and get those hands because this will be an ongoing piece of our conversation. So we'll go ahead and collect the hands first. Candace, you are the first on my screen.
You're muted.
Lee has had his hand up longer than I have. So-
Ladies first.
Okay. All right. Well, part of what I'd like to hear when people's ranking is a rationale. So, I appreciated that with Bishop Stokes saying why it is he said that. So I'm going to say why for me. If I'm forced to make a choice, these are my choices. I would start off with number 1, because in my opinion, it's extraordinarily important for our children to get a good start. And we know from science that brain capacity, et cetera, is so influenced by those first 3 years. That's the science. So having said that, then I would put the nurturing caregiving number 2. Those, to me, just like, I'm not sure who said that, those really go together. Your child is born healthy through support system, and number 2 is that you make sure that continues. Number 3 would be safe. And again, they're all important. And then I put education at the last, not because I don't believe it's important, because I do, but I feel like the big player in there is the public school system. And I think our role is to find out from them and from the community what's missing and figure out how to support that most effectively. So that's my rationale and my ranking.
Thank you. That's really helpful, actually. Thank you, Candace.
Yeah.
Lee? Hop in there.
1, then 2, and I was typing it in because I think you have to have 3 and 4 in order for number 2 to exist. Because how many children are going to be successful if their house is in chaos or their family, the environment they're living in is chaos. So, in order to make 2 happen, 3 and 4 become natural. They have to be a component of that. And I know that's, y'all probably think that's weaseling out of it, but it's not, because ultimately, if you want 2 to happen, you're gonna have to fund the other 2, which is what y'all are looking after, right? You want to know where we're gonna put our money.
Mm-hmm. Or how to at least prioritize it, because we know you're going to put money in all 4.
I put
So-
1, then 2.
1, then 2. Got it. Thank you, Lee. And then, Pat, did you have a hand up, or did I just imagine that?
I did, but then I put it in the chat. But I can provide a rationale, and most people have already said what it is, right? So I think born healthy and remain healthy. And remain healthy, I think we've heard eons of information about all of the health, mental health, dental issues, all of the health related nutrition, all of the things that are so important, not only from birth to 5, but across the lifespan. Number 3, I put in because, of course, I believe that the foundation for all learning begins with nurturing and responsive relationships. And I think that the trust has a real opportunity to make a huge impact in that particular area. the early learning piece, of course, builds off of that. And I understand and appreciate, and it's certainly Safe Communities. I wish we could all address that, but someone said earlier, it's an intergovernmental issue, I think. And just my lived experiences are that we all need a stake in that, of course. But it's a multifaceted issue, and I want to make sure that we're still, before we can have safe communities for everybody, we're making sure that we build as much resilience and as possible, and trauma-informed supports for those who are living in unsafe communities. So that's my rationale.
Thank you. No, that's definitely
And
helpful.
my ranking was the exact same as Pat. I think she said it more eloquently than I could have, but again, I think, you know, we focus on getting that strong start in a child's life to make sure that everything else starts falling in place for them. So I said 1, 3, 2, 4, because again, you know, parents as teachers being nurturing, kids going to school, feeling secure in who they are already makes a huge difference on how they learn and their ability to learn. And having those strong family structures in place is key to that. I think I said at the last meeting, you know, if the family stressors are so high and that they're worried about how they're going to pay their bills and how they're going to feed their children and all those things, it's really hard to focus on education if you don't have that piece in place first. So education, you know, that's important to set the kids up for success. And then while safety is huge, and this was the hardest exercise I've ever done, which is why I'm just now weighing in, safety is huge in this community. We're having so many instances lately, but I don't know how well we as a trust can tackle that. I think that is a true partnership between DJJ and GPD and the sheriff's office and some of the providers that are mentoring focused that somehow come up with that program that can support that.
Thank you, Cheryl. We know this is extremely difficult. We're going to keep doing this again. So thank you for those who are making sure we have their official ranking in the chat. We know this is not the first or the last time. We're going to continue to have this kind of come into full, it'll become clear as we go. So the next part that we wanted to do was to now that we got a little bit of sense of like the macro, like looking at everything, now we're going to look into the specific strategies that you have listed under the priority areas and say, but what if we had to put those in the same order, right? Like what if we had to prioritize those using those same kind of guidelines around where do we have the opportunity to make the greatest impact? Where are things already in place and position where we could see some really great movement and we think we should be? And again, if it's a strategy, you've already made a commitment to resource it. That's the way we're thinking of it. Of course, you can always change your mind and say we don't want to, you know, invest in a particular strategy, but that's the orientation we're holding, is if you put a strategy down, that's where you want to resource. Now we're just trying to get a sense of like, how are those strategies being prioritized? So I will share the next one. And I don't think we're in order any. So this is what so far we've collected as it relates to all children are born and remain healthy. And like you said, you've had robust conversations in different places and spaces, and we've been trying to just make sure we gather them all up. I've recently just added today, the comprehensive services for families with children with special needs. And I heard everything to access to health services, you know, IEP, IFSP support, respite. We know there's more. So we certainly want you to say, these are the strategies that we think are worthy of investment. And now we would have to go through a little bit of that same kind of thinking to say, all right, we know this is all going to be meaningful, but how would I put this in order for prioritizing where we could have the greatest impact? And then, oh, go ahead, Vashti.
I was gonna say also, can you, I think to add to this one is the infant mortality and child death rate strategy because.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just didn't do the update on the document. So
no,
I
put it in the notes. So I was like, oh, I put it in the notes, but I didn't put it on the slide. But then I think it'll be important for you all to see that that's like one of the places where you want to have the impact is around, right? There's infant mortality, there's You know, there was a lot of conversations around health and well-being, but and especially access to care initially. So thinking about all of these different potential ways to address children being born and remaining healthy, which ones are the trust position to have to make a significant impact on?
I'm gonna pull it back up. I just did a refresh of my screen, so that way you would be able to see that we did add the one around child death rates. So it's just taking a quick second to upload. So I can say them while we, yeah, you're not gonna, well, you know, I'm just gonna share it, and then one will be slightly cut off, but you'll still be able to see it. Let me know if you're able to see. Vashti, are you able to see those?
No, I'm not seeing your screen share right now.
Okay. Let me.
There we go. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So the last one is cut off. That last one was comprehensive services for families with special needs children. So that was that last one. It's just going beyond the slide.
And just to, you know, we don't want to, I don't know how to say this. We want you to, you know, think about it kind of from the lens of where you are now. But I think just based off of the conversation from Monday, was it Monday? Or last week, I'm trying to think which one I'm referring to, but just knowing, right, that like right now, right, you have investments in kind of, so, you know, newborn home visiting programs and maternal, maternal family partners and, you know, kind of some of those different types of, just to give you kind of an idea of like, oh, what does this mean? What is actually, how would we do this? But like, you have some of these programs existing. So just thinking about the wellness coordinator, Saving Smiles. So like some of the things that you currently have nested under, you know, kind of children are born and remain healthy, how you feel about that existing scope of work, where you think there's opportunity to either do more, maintain kind of your status quo, or shift resources into another place may, you know, potentially help how you think about, these are the things we've talked about, where actually are we going to be able to stake our claim? Because this is a lot. These are a lot of different ways. So even if, you know, we keep them all or we narrow it down just in order to make sure that here's where the priority is for children are born and remain healthy.
And there's one other one that I just want to mention. You had maternal child health programs. So I think some of your home visiting programs, you just had them in that nurturing relationship. So they were in that caregiver. That's the strategy you had listed them under as it related to your maternal child health programs, which we know could also impact children are born and remain healthy. But that's just where you had it listed.
Nikki, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
It says preventative dental care. That would be partnering with a provider, right? So and to explain the difference between, or because it's specific with that one, because obviously we're not going to do it. So we'd have to be partnering with somebody. So is the third one down just a subset of the fourth one down? And
I think that's absolutely a way that you could combine it. We were trying to, you know, try to hold to, for some, when we had this conversation, they provided us with direct list of how they saw them. And so they had it broken out in two places. So they said access to comprehensive care, and they had listed it. But then as a strategy, they had it listed as well. And we wanted for this group to make that determination about, wait a minute, is this really covered in access to comprehensive care along with partnering with system providers? So really wanting the group to kind of make that determination. And we were just trying to honor what the initial group had given us.
So Nikki, I don't understand what partnering with system providers means. I mean, virtually everything I think that CTEC is doing is partnering with system providers. So, Lee, to your point, all of this, access to comprehensive care. I mean, part of that is getting people to where they can be cared for by providers, but not to split hairs. I think the reason why we had dental here is because it tends to get lost. And that's probably why we had it, to make sure we don't lose the dental, just like we put in special needs elsewhere so we don't lose the special needs. So I don't know how you organize that to express it, but I'd sure like to see dental continue.
Yep. And so again, that partnering with system providers, in some instances, this is kind of just how we received it. And so not knowing if there was and that's why we're giving it back. That's what we were telling Marsha. We're like, we don't want to make assumptions about what the folks who contributed, what they were meaning behind this. So if there are those who would like to kind of speak up and say, well, we did have some specific goals around it, we just didn't document them or do the report out. Just so you know, Vashti and I went back through those. We went through the recording several times, as well as we actually went through the transcripts just to make sure that like we weren't missing it. And so I think you raised some really valid points about how we can think about some of these, in particular with preventative dental care and partnering with system providers if there aren't some specific goals that are attached.
Nikki, may I make a suggestion? With the care coordination, that's going to be a topic that I think that the board needs to look at and just say, are we going to do this or are we not going to do this? And so it is kind of a conversation in and of itself, and doesn't necessarily, and then it's going to require a certain amount of, either money, staff time, whatever it is, but that is, that's just on its own island. And then the rest of it, if we're using these strategy, all children are born and remain healthy, then why don't we list what's important as, say, infant mortality and child death rate? That was the number one, I think. And then we say, access to comprehensive care, that's number two. And then dental care is number three. And specific areas where we can attack it, as opposed, and then you're giving it, and then we're going to take back to the board recommendation for specifics, and that may not be the complete list, but that that's just I think a way to get the conversation going.
So what do others think about that care coordination piece? It sounds like the recommendation is that there needs to be targeted, focused conversation amongst the entire board on that piece. So that would come off of this list for the time being. Am I hearing that right?
That's what I'm putting out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
And
don't
then
know.
with-
I'm sorry, Nikki.
No. So, and then the only other part that I was capturing is then focusing in on infant mortality rate, access to care, and then still having dental as a pullout. But that's what I captured. So,
Or
Marsha,
whatever
what-
we want to include.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm fine, I think, with the ranking, although I guess I'm a little confused about why preventative dental care would be separated out from access to comprehensive care. But maybe that's just, that's just me and my perspective. And did we mention the one that we can't see, the one about special needs? Because I do think that needs to be a part of this as well.
Marsha, I think one of the reasons why, and I think it says in the access to comprehensive care, we've got primary care. Well, this has got prenatal, but mental health and dental care. And that's because they come from 3 different systems, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So if we're going to look at the system side, medical doctors, medical care, mental health care, and dental care are different worlds. So I think that's why we got it that way. I also wanted, I don't know if you guys talked about it, I had to slip away for a minute. The maternal, the nurse visitation program.
Mhm.
Have we talked about that? Because I think
Yeah.
that's part of, I think, that early it's even, I mean, you can see it under access to comprehensive care, but that intervention at an early stage, maybe that fits into, to me, both health as well as supportive and nurturing assistance for parents. I think, again, I don't know how well the program is performing, although when I hear the presentations, it sounds very, very good. But to me, that's a critical access point, but I'm not a birth to 3 person. So I know that CTAC has considered that to be an important program over time. So I defer to like Lee and Pat and others that this is something that they've either worked with or know more about than I do.
I think it's an important, very important program. And I think we're at a point, from my perspective, that we want to step back and think about what existing supports are funding that kind of program from other sources. McBee, Healthy Start, Healthy Families. The reason the trust invested in the CTAC recommended so strongly the nurse home visitation program is because it was a way to network a number of hospitals, midwife programs, et cetera, and make it universal. And some of those other programs are means tested programs. And so that was the rationale for the funding support that was provided initially. Julie, when she came to the last trust meeting, as we all recall, Julie Motory said that they now had a father engagement program that was being funded by another entity. But I think, again, once we figure out these strategies, being able to see what's already funded and by whom, and then where are the gaps, as we've said multiple times in our meetings. So I think it's incredibly important. We have some investment in there, but I think as we move forward, and we even talked about this at the trust meeting, I can't remember if it was the trust meeting or the Board of County Commissioners meeting, they're all running together now. But anyway, wherever we talked about it, I think we talked about the need to kind of step back and do that kind of analysis, right? And I think Vashti and Nikki started that way too, right after we figure this out, like stepping back and seeing like who's in the game and who needs to get in the game and where the gaps are. So I think that's a good example of a program that was really important to get universal out there. We have some data about who's utilized it, who might otherwise not have been qualified for other programs or how they got connected to other programs. And I think we can use that information to make informed decisions about what the future of it looks like from my perspective.
And I
Christy,
remember one of the, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
I was just gonna say, I remember at one of the meetings too, and I had written this down, and I'm as confused on what was said at which meeting by who, but when we're looking at funding any program or any initiatives, that we step back and focus on putting out proposals that encourage the collaborative piece. I think that's where we were looking at working with system partners, because I had put that agencies should be working in a complementary way, impact the whole child. And so it's looking at, because there's so many different agencies that either focus on the same thing or focus on pieces that when you pull them together into a collaborative effort can really impact a lot of areas in a child's life. And so I think that was an important piece that we need to kind of look through that lens in each of these areas, that, you know, are we seeking collaboration when we're looking at programs that we want to fund or initiatives that we want to be a part of?
I concur. I also wanted to point out in a chat, Christy, you put in the chat 2 really important points, and that's that we have not, in writing at least, included transportation and mental health specifically. And we know that those are talked about, at least mental health has been talked about a lot. So, you know, I would say, Christy, you're right. We probably ought to make sure those words are in there somewhere. I mean, we've got it under comprehensive mental health. That's probably the only place, but transportation isn't anywhere yet. It's an overarching, I know that, Lee, well, I know it's an overarching, but nevertheless, we're talking words now that need to appear before other people.
Well, when we get to the learning strategy, we also learned the other day, right, with the meeting with the commission, that county commission, that literacy is also going to be an overarching one. So to me, it's like, right, mental health, literacy, transportation, those the big three we walked away from on Monday.
Literacy, transport. And there's a question for the committee to take up around measuring impact. And is the trust looking for impact, immediately, 1 year, 5 years from now? Since so much of our conversation is around where can the trust see impact, and thinking about rankings as that being one element of how you're making these determinations. And so it's just a question out there.
I think it's a really good question because as we begin to formulate what our recommendation is going to be to the board, I do think we have to consider, in addition to what's going on right now. Right now, we have a critical literacy issue. We have a critical issue with gun violence. In 3 years, that may change, right? There's going to be another critical issue. So I think it's important for us to think about, what's the length of this strategic plan, understanding that we should be doing check-ins annually, right? So that the board can then say, hey, maybe this critical issue has now shifted down and something else has risen to the top, and we would have the flexibility to move some things around. So I hate to see us, I know in the past, other organizations I've been a part of, our strategic plan was very stagnant, and it didn't allow for us, the organization, to grow and for those issues, right, to marinate, so to speak. And as they did, some things tended to continue to rise to the level of address, and others did not. Others needed to sort of be sunset, if you will. So I don't know how we do all of that, but I do think that's important for us to discuss at some juncture.
Yeah, it's
And
kind of a balancing act, Marcia, right? We talked about like sunsetting some, and it's it's like a seesaw, but how do we get balance but not balance, right? And yeah, I think that's a good point. I think in terms of impact, Chrissy, you all and Bonnie can say more about this too, but we're really more right now at really more of the effort, how much and how well did we do it? And we are seeing some impacts. We are seeing some early impacts, but we're pretty early in that game from my perspective, which would not be unexpected, because I think it takes 4, 5, 6 years to actually see impact effects.
Which I think is one of the reasons why you spend so much time reviewing the environmental scan, because that's all the population level data, which exactly, as Pat said, is going to take time to see, movement in those spaces. But it's where can we see kind of, and I think it's a little bit of all, as I'm hearing, right? There are places and spaces where you're going to be able to see some things that are going to be immediate. And then there are other places where you're saying, we know we can have impact here, but the gauge for impact might be 3, 4, 5 years before we have kind of proof that it has done what we set out to do. And so it sounds like that you will be making those determinations as it aligns with scopes and bodies of work, so that there's not unfair expectations necessarily placed on someone right from the beginning, that we're going to see all, you're one literacy provider and you get the goal of, well, we need to see 100% increase in literacy rates in year 1. I certainly don't think those are the kinds of directions that you're moving in. Yep, I see agreement there. So I went ahead and just made some changes based on the conversation as it relates to all children are born and remain healthy, with a recognition that the access to comprehensive care, and have bolded that preventative dental care, so it's not lost. So there's primary care, mental health, and preventative care, recognizing is exactly as it was stated that these are, they're a part of a health and medical system, but they are individual specific kind of focus areas, and recognizing that there's connection to each for families to be able to get what they need to remain healthy, to be born healthy and remain healthy. Additionally, I heard a thought around care coordination. I would love to hear others if they feel like that's a strategy that should remain in the strategic planning process, or if they feel like that should be a pull-out conversation that goes to the board under a different set of priorities. Do we want to leave that idea of care coordination in as a strategy recommendation? Or do we want to have, is that a separate conversation for the board?
I was saying, Nikki, what I was saying is it needs to be in there, but I think as far as priority wise, it's in and of itself, you know, that because it weaves through all the different strategies that we're going to be discussing. So it needs to be in there. I don't want to see it eliminated, but I think that the way I see this process is we make the decision here is the coordinator and here are all the programs. The coordinator is going to be a discussion that's going to have some sort of financial impact. We need to count on that. And then based upon that conversation, we see how much we have to spend on other things.
I agree with Lee, although I want to make sure when we say care coordination, it's got the warm hand part of it, and it's got the accurate, timely resource guide part of it. So it's both those things. Okay, I see you nodding your head, Lee.
Yes.
Lee, good.
And I think someone had said it in the context of care coordination and navigation. So it inferring that it is that warm handoff and actually supporting that moving through.
This is an advertised discussion. So, and there are other board members on here. So, you know, if they don't agree with me, you know, we can eliminate, you know, maybe a 30-minute discussion. So always trying to be time efficient with my love of meetings.
It's appreciated. So then for this particular, that takes us to did we want to, so access to comprehensive care, I think we clearly kind of see that one. Care coordination and navigation. I think there's naturally, I think, Carol, there's a way you speak to it that also speaks to the goals, right? About like increasing the number of people who kind of get what they need when they need it and in a timely manner. I've certainly heard you speak to that piece. And then there was the infant mortality and child death rate, which for me was kind of falling more in the goals section. Are there particular strategies? I certainly have heard around the home visiting potentially being one, well, nursing with the nursing home visiting. I know that's certainly one of the outcomes that are often kind of connected with them. Were there any other strategies that folks wanted to add, refine, clarify?
The nursing visiting is after the fact, you know, as far as remaining healthy, but that they're born naturally, we're going to have to figure out a way to work with the pediatricians or whoever, you know, midwives or whoever, because that's prenatal.
And if, well, so I don't know which nursing home visiting you're funding, but there's one that starts prenatally. Is that the one you're funding that starts when?
The one I'm thinking of is the one in the one in the hospital.
So implicit with prenatal care is access to comprehensive medical care. Many times women don't even receive prenatal care. So to me, that's where that comes in. Of course, I guess Cheryl, places like DCF or other agencies may identify at-risk households. And I don't know if that's a program that CTAC funds, but ultimately you got to get to them medically, right?
Well, and I think the key is the prenatal care, like promoting that. It's our agency has a big focus on trying to get services in to prevent substance exposed newborns, which we all know outcomes for that population of kids that are already born substance exposed or alcohol syndrome exposed, things like that. You know, it sets them up for a lifetime of heartache and failures, and you know, it's a tougher haul. So I think the care coordination may feed into that a little bit, as far as, you know, making sure that families know how to access these programs and make sure they're connected with, you know, a good OBGYN or, you know, it's a lot of things that are involved in that. And then it's the aftercare that the home visiting program provides after the child's born.
We're also beginning to look into Google services as well. I think that may be another important to mind.
Christy, I'm having an issue hearing you. Is that just on my end?
Can you all hear me?
Can you
No,
say
we
that
can't.
again?
The doula services?
Okay, okay. You couldn't, okay, thank you.
Sorry, having some technical difficulties.
So Vashti, we have about 13 minutes left. We have, see, I think Ken said it, right? We made the mistake of noting that we were right on time. And Ken put in the chat, like, what? And so we should not have said it because now we've backed ourselves into a bit of a corner. There are 2 additional that we were looking to get some rankings on, but now you kind of see the process and flow. Essentially, what we want to be able to do is take these rankings and then begin to translate them back to you in a way that's more correlated with some of the percents that you've spoken to. And then we're going to look at them along various axes. So age access will be one. We're going to look at them from the standpoint of then you kind of speaking into, you know, how much is this a universal strategy versus promotion versus intervention, or is it, you know, or within this strategy, we want to see multiple things occurring. There's a few different ways that we're going to want to look at this to be able to kind of land our plane, if you will. I know we're going to be together and having much fuller time in May, but I think it would be extremely helpful if we did some of this kind of offline as homework for the ones that we were not able to get to. Vashti, what are your thoughts? Because there's 2 additional ones. I haven't necessarily heard rankings for this one fully. I think I've heard a few, but I think there's enough from the conversation that we can hear like how folks are prioritizing. You know, I'm hearing access to comprehensive care with primary care, mental health, and preventative dental. I've heard that kind of loud and clear in this conversation, along with care coordination and navigation. What are your thoughts?
So I know we probably won't, I think we could potentially at least start the conversation because on learning, because if we just use the last 10 minutes for it, because the other 2 just have like basically 2 strategies, right? And we kind of know what the primary one is really for the most part. So if we could maybe just quickly pull, if you want to share the slide around all children can learn what they need to be successful, because there's a lot there. And we know that there's a lot of investment in that area from the trust, from a financial perspective, and that you all have a significant stake in 3rd grade reading proficiency. And we actually didn't, from our previous conversation, have exactly what, I mean, the goal is probably just that all kids are on target to read, right? By 3rd grade, or what, you know, what the marker is, probably maybe where we start to get into the specifics, and you also add like a percentage or increase of what you're looking for as far as the change from beginning to end. But we really love to just get some initial feedback on, you've got this fairly robust set of strategies that you're investing in: VPK, kindergarten readiness, 3rd grade reading, positive learning environments, which really gets to educator support and professional development, and then the out of school time activities, which is where a lot of the, I'm thinking that's where the summer camps and the after school programs are nested, which is where a lot of the support for older kids is at. And so just would like to just take these last maybe 8 or 9 minutes to just kind of hear from you all. And Marsha, this might be a great place for you to jump in about the 3rd grade reading, but just like kind of where the trust is positioned to have the greatest impact. Where do you have to have the greatest impact, and what is going to take priority in this area?
Well, actually, I think we have a couple of our board members on here who are better,
Okay.
I think better to speak to the 3rd grade reading proficiency. Certainly that is an area of importance in our community, and has risen to really a crisis point for us right now. And so at our meeting on Monday, our board and our county commission really just, agree that somebody has to take point on us figuring out literacy in our county, and the county commission had already met with the school board. We have both the school board chair and superintendent on our board. So the trust is going to be working with the library, the school system, to come to the table to try and figure out how we together can help to increase our third grade literacy in the county. So is it a priority? Certainly. Does it rise above all of the others? I think that's a discussion point.
To that point. Oh, I see other hands up, sorry.
Who's here? Who's here? I don't see him. Oh, okay, I see.
Go on,
wanna-
Vashti. I was going to say, if you can't see them, I can.
I
can
had
call
to
them.
scroll up. I was like, where are they? I don't know who's first. I'm just gonna go down the list. I'm gonna start with Liz. You're on mute.
Sorry, I just added it in the chat because it was on the
Okay.
other question. We've already moved on, so I just added in the question.
Okay, I got it, but I'll put it in the notes for that. Okay,
Thanks, Liz.
okay. And then Candace, you want to jump in?
Well, I just a suggestion. I don't know if this is following the how you're going to nest things, but with out of school time activities, and I think this came up previously, like in RFP for something else. In RFPs for out of school time activities, maybe we can include literacy as a component that has to be part of that. I mean, if we don't already. So that would tie that into the other focus, obviously, with getting kids ready for school, et cetera. Part of the reason I bring this up is I think that oftentimes that mentoring takes place in out of school activities. Mentoring and tutoring take place in out of school activities, or should, if they're not.
Make sure we capture that. That's a great point.
And then Ken, you have your hand up too.
Thank you. So to the point that Dr. Kiner was making, I think if we put this investment into quality VPK, that obviously helps everything else. And I agree what I said in the chat with the third grade reading proficiency. I mean, it's third grade literacy, which would be math and reading. I think that's a valid point. But I think it goes back to the comment I made at one of the board meetings, where if we miss 1 year in 0 to 5, 90% of the brain's developed, we spend the rest of that person's life addressing that trauma in that year, or that we missed that year. And I think we're going to start seeing the effects of COVID in future years. And so I think this is where I would like us to really have in my opinion, the highest priority. Nothing against the out of school time. But I think the more we spend early, and this is essentially the argument that we made that the voters decided on when they voted for this trust. The more we spend early, the less we spend on the backside.
I'm not able to see, but is there agreement? Are folks seeing that differently? Would love to make sure we kind of capture.
Just put something quickly in the chat, and I know, because I know we're getting close to the end of time, but to Christie's point, maybe we have the strategy and the goal backwards on this slide, because from my perspective on Monday at the meeting with the commission, what we agreed to was a strategy that we were going to implement to bring people together and really get on board around this across the age span from birth to 18. So maybe if I'm understanding correctly, maybe we want to think about the strategy being what we talked about on Monday. And the goal would be to have children reading and remain reading with proficiency across the age span. So just a thought. And certainly those markers about what's at third grade and ninth and, you know, those points, school entry are certainly ways we can measure those things, but I think we might have it reversed, and that might help us think a little bit more quickly about this particular.
And I'm not sure why I have this Prince thing going on. My screen looks purple, but I would somewhat disagree and agree at the same time. I am a proponent of out of school time. My program is, you know, basically surrounding young people after school, but with the programs that we do, I see how out of school time, connecting third grade proficiency, providing a positive learning environment, and all of those can work together. And I certainly would love to, you know, make sure that out of time school is certainly considered, because I think that there's an opportunity to still impact every one of those services. I have kids here who are in VPK. I have kindergarten. I get, you know, all of these things can really be incorporated through out of town and not out of town, out of school time as well. So that would be my 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Can you say those again? I'm not able to see. And so your 1, 2, 3, and 4, can you just name those for me?
So my 1 was out of school time.
Mm-hmm.
My 2 was third grade reading proficiency, positive learning, and then the other 2 would be time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
So is there anybody else who would like to verbalize? I know for some we're verbal processors. Is there anybody else who'd like to verbalize
Yes.
their thinking? Perfect.
I think that I would hope, and this is just that we would include in our reading proficiency that we say reading and math. I think both of those need to be in there, and I agree that we need to keep our children proficient from whenever they can be to the whole 0 to 18. The other thing is, not all children go to VPK, so how do we address the children that aren't in VPK that enter school and aren't ready? I mean, there's a, you know, I don't think it's an insignificant percentage of people. So what do we do about their children? What do we do about that?
I agree.
Yeah, I know we've previously spoken about, for some, it's personal choice to say, you know, the first few years, we're going to keep them home, or sometimes it might not be being able to find a provider, or there's a lot of reasons why families make those how they come to those determinations. Yeah.
Maybe even encouraging more VPK sites, because that's what we're actually looking at now, is the possibility of becoming a VPK site, because of the importance that we see and the lack of services here in our area.
Right. Well, we are just at
Hey, Nikki,
time.
Pat
Yes.
has her hand raised. It's been raised the entire time.
Sorry, Pat,
No.
please.
Good, I put comments in the chat. I'm good, so.
So Marcia, we need you to be our extra set of eyes there. Is there anybody else as I come off of sharing my screen? And Vashti is like rapidly capturing notes there.
I know, I'm sorry, I probably missed it because I thought it was from before, and then I've been taking notes, so I apologize, Pat.
No.
For leaving you hanging there.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm excited to see that purple background now.
Oh, yeah.
It's given me joy, so I'll take it. So what we're going to look at is taking what we've heard today we're gonna give this back to you again. It's just one pass. There's one that we really did not touch on, but to Vashti's point, that's the one that we started our conversation around, like around safety. And I think there's really 3 strategies. So that one you might find a little easier to say, you know, 1, 2, 3, or I have 2 number ones, however that is. But we'll go ahead and send that to you. And then we're going to take all this information and start prepping for what we're going to do in person in May, which is then going to be looking at all the different access points. So we've talked about them, you know, what's the investment in promotion, prevention, intervention? What's the investment according to age? But we really wanted to ensure that we had some time with you to ground the conversation from strategy first, and then thinking about all those other ways that we can understand your funding priorities. So on that note, it's helpful for us because I think we now have a set of strategies that we know that the committee is invested in financially resourcing. And now it's just going to be about finalizing some of those conversations around, you know, percents. Vashti, is there anything else for the good of the group before we turn it back over to Chairwoman?
No, I think that's it until we see each other in a couple weeks.
All right, and we're so grateful. If we didn't get to it, we're also going to look through the chat again, so we'll get information from there as well.
So ladies, I thought I heard, sorry, Cheryl, did you
No.
mention any homework? Are you all going to send us some homework? And can you kind of tee that up so that we'll know what it's going to look like?
Absolutely. So the one that we didn't get to was around community, that, you know, all children are in safe communities. So we're going to just ask you to look at those strategies one last time and saying to do the very hard task of prioritizing those strategies. And so it'll be very similar to what you did today. I think it might have been Candace who said, you know, providing the context for how you arrive there will be important. So we'll just kind of give you a quick 1-pager. Again, it probably is going to take you 10 minutes to think through, okay, these are the strategies we've committed to. If I had to prioritize them, someone's, you know, asking me to, even though it's not the way I'd like to think about them, how would I prioritize them and why? And so we'll go ahead and get that out to you. Today's Thursday, so I would say we'll get it to the trust by Monday at the latest. And then if you wanted to take about a week to complete that activity and we get it back the following Monday, that would be helpful.
Okay. So, well, thank you both for facilitating this meeting. And, you know, we're 4 minutes over. I do want to open up. Do we have anybody from the public on that wants to make any comments?
Cheryl, there are 2 comments that I can see in the Q&A. I don't know if the individual is still on or not, but it's Allison Marks. So there are 2 questions in there.
Is Allison still on? Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to mention that we asked Allison's questions as she was, as she typed them in. So I'm not sure if she wanted to add any additional context to them.
And Marcia's typing an answer around the, I believe as far as what the timeline is for when we're talking about impact. And then we grabbed the link that she shared on her first comment about the work that's being done in Colorado around around service navigation.
Okay, very good. Are there any other public comments? Anybody else on? Okay. Well, I didn't catch it earlier, but it looks like on our agenda, they had the dates from a prior agenda on there. So our next meeting is, what is the date in May? I know it's an in-person meeting.
May 19th.
May 19th. And that will be at the Trust Board office. Any final comments before we adjourn? Okay, thank you all. We will see you again in May.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Have a good
you.
rest of your